Well, greetings everyone from Cooperstown, New York, site of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. We're very glad you could join us today for Virtual Voices of the Game. Our guest is a pioneering Major League scout. Her name is Christie Wood. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bruce Marcuson. I work in the Hall of Fame's Education Department. I'd love to tell you that it's a beautiful spring day here in Cooperstown, but I would probably be fibbing a little bit. We did have a bit of a snowstorm that greeted us last night and early this morning, but the sun is out. We're ready to talk baseball. And opening day, which officially started earlier this week, will really take full bloom next week when all of the other teams, besides the Dodgers and the Padres, start their season. Christie Wood has worked as a scout for Major League Baseball for nearly 25 years. First for the Major League Baseball Scouting Bureau, and now specializing in video scouting. She is the first woman to hold an on-field scouting position in Major League Baseball history. Christie, welcome to Virtual Voices of the Game. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. This is Cooperstown. This is a dream come true. I mean, I'm very honored for you guys to want to have this conversation with me. I'm very honored.
Well, we're pleased to have you. You've got some interesting things in the background, including a Peanuts comic strip. And I was telling you earlier that a number of years ago here at the Hall of Fame, we had a temporary exhibit about Charles Schultz and his Peanuts cartoon because he often used baseball as part of his theme. What's some of that other memorabilia behind you?
Well, we got in 2000, I worked with the Olympic team when down in Sydney when U.S. team won the gold medal. So that's very important to me. My best friend, her brother, played for the Red Sox, Trout, and so her mother gave me that print. So that's very important to me. And then we got the Orleans Firebirds, as their name is now. When I was an intern in the Cape, we were the Orleans Cardinals, and so that is a tribute to my team in the Cape that I interned with. That actually I've learned about this job, doing. And then of course the Peanuts they've been special to me my whole life, and they always have a lot of tributes to baseball and includes baseball, which I love. And then just my NC State degrees, which started a lot for me going to NC State, and then some memorabilia from games over the years, and my parents in the back.
Yeah. Trot Nixon, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. He was a pretty good right fielder with the Red Sox back in the day.
Yeah, he was all right. Yeah, we'll keep him. So yeah, he was actually slated to come to NC State and play quarterback for us and play baseball, and he was drafted, seventh pick by the Red Sox. So he decided to head on up to the big leagues, and his sister and I became friends in college, and still my best friend now, and got to kind of learn about the game a little bit, traveling with her to see him and stories about him. So he was one of my first, big league players that I've got to know.
Did you scout him or did he come before you?
No, I didn't. We were about the same. We're about the same age, so
Okay.
we would have been in college at the same time.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to talk about your younger days. Tell us about where you grew up and tell us about this incredible love you had of sports, because in doing some research about you, you played soccer, tennis, you were involved in swimming and diving, basketball, fencing, and cross country. Pretty amazing.
It was. I think I just came out of the womb loving sports. My dad actually worked with the basketball team at NC State when he was in school, so maybe I got some of that from him. But yeah, from early ages, started soccer at 5, I think tennis about 8, and then throughout the years, summers playing swimming and tennis and then gymnastics, and had love for cheerleading. And then I went to in high school, I went to a private high school, and you had a few more opportunities to play. So played basketball there, cheered, soccer, ran cross country. I'm a slow runner, but I can run for days. So that's the difference there. I can run a long way, but I'm not a sprinter. And then focused more on soccer in college and tennis in college, and kind of stayed with soccer after that. But fencing was really cool. Is the headmaster of the high school knew how to fence, and he just had a posting one day. If you want to learn how to fence, come see me at lunch. So that's where that come from. So it's kind of funny, but yeah, just I mean, I grew up, in North Carolina, where college basketball is king, and so and growing up in the Triangle, you got State, Duke, and North Carolina, 25, 30 miles apart from each other, and just that. I remember 1983 when State won the national championship, jumping up and down, on my parents' bed, so excited we won the championship. So just been exposed to sports at an early age. And I actually wrote some of the stars with NC State, Derek Whittenberg, Sidney Lowe, and uh, Thurl Bailey a letter asking them to come have dinner at my house. And I never heard back from that request, but I sent them a request, back in when I was a child. But it just grew up around sports. I loved it. I mean, I loved playing sports. Has just been, a passion of mine, like I said, as long as I can remember. And it was just an avenue for me to do so many things. And I love like I said, growing up, I think growing up in around State, Duke, and Carolina had a lot, to do with that.
In reading the articles about you playing all these sports, I didn't see any mention of you playing baseball or softball. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, I didn't find the opportunities quite as much, in Raleigh growing up. I mean, like I said, soccer was really big. We had a thing called Castle, and so soccer was just the easiest to play. It was, I mean, not easy to play skill wise, but more opportunities to play Castle and soccer. And so I went, just went that avenue and mostly, played soccer most of my young life. But I didn't really find opportunities, or maybe I wasn't looking well enough, but the opportunities to play baseball and softball, growing up. I played softball for fun, rec, and like college and young adult. But yeah, I didn't find those opportunities. And like I said, maybe my eyes were just, diverted at other sports. But yeah, I'd like to go back now and maybe play a little bit.
Yeah. Were you a fan of baseball at a young age?
I was. I most remember growing up seeing the Braves on TBS. And I remember that odd start time every time. It was either like 7:35 or 6:35. And that 35 like really stuck with me. And so I remember watching the Braves as a kid. And then when I watched the Braves on TBS and then the Cubs on WGN, we would get the Cubs games on WGN. And then when I was 13, my mom took one of my brothers and I to Los Angeles, and we went and saw the Dodgers play. And that's the first big league park I ever went to, was the Dodgers. And good place to start, right? And I remember that night, Oral Hershiser was pitching, and I remember thinking, he's given up quite a few hits. And maybe that's just child logic. I don't know if that was actually true for Mr. Hershiser, but that's what I remember thinking that night. And Kirk Gibson was on the team, and I remember my brother trying to get his autograph after the game. And my mom, driving us to Chavez Ravine, and this is the days way before GPS, of course, and just, my mom, taking us to that game. And she grew up, I think her dad, if I remember correctly, like the Orioles, if I'm not mistaken. And so, so that was the first big league park I ever went to. And like I said, through that in person and then through TV, that's where I knew, have a love for, for MLB and baseball. But it's, as I said, just all sports kind of general has just been my passion.
You mentioned watching the Braves on Superstation TBS, and I'm a few years older than you, but I'm not that much older that I certainly remember watching those games in the 1980s. The Braves, I always think of Bruce Benedict, Dale Murphy, Terry Harper, Rick Mailer. They weren't great teams. Murphy was a great player. The teams themselves, especially mid to late 80s, weren't especially good, but it was fun watching those games. They were on every night. And I do remember those odd start times. It was always 5 minutes after the hour or half hour. Very strange.
It was, and I think it made you tune in. I really do. I think it made you want to watch even more, just because of some of those odd start times. But yeah.
So when did you start to become interested in baseball as a potential career? When did that happen?
Oh, I would have to say that started in North Carolina State. I was in the sports world, with the soccer team, and I started being, in love with sports broadcasting and the art of sports broadcasting. Actually, one shining moment at the end of every NCAA basketball tournament made me start thinking about video camera shooting. Is the one shining moment highlight tape was my favorite thing of the year. So I said, I want to do highlight tapes. I want to do video. And so I was interested in sports broadcasting. That was the starting days of ESPN and kind of things like that. So, but back then cameras, they weren't everywhere. So I had, just had cameras my mom had bought me because she used to shoot my sports games in high school for me. And so I just started using a camera since about middle school, but a video camera, high school and college. And so I started filming the sports at State because I knew wherever you start out in broadcasting, you have to be able to shoot, edit, be on camera, do everything. You have to do it all because you start out in a small market. So you have to be able to do it all. So State already had a set crew for football and they already had a set crew for men's basketball, but there wasn't really anybody shooting all the other sports. So I said, well, I'm going to shoot all the other sports and gain that experience. So I shot women's basketball, shot wrestling, shot swimming, and everything. So, but well, I got to circle back. Sorry, I got to start over again a little bit. But that's where the video. But actually, with baseball, the year before I started shooting video for them, I actually did the radio broadcasting for NC State baseball because, like I said, I was looking for any exposure to the world of sports media, sports broadcasting, and I found out that State wasn't broadcasting their baseball games. So I asked the campus radio station, what do I have to do to broadcast the baseball games? And they said, well, you got to do some fundraising. You got to bring in some funds. So I went to local businesses and sold ad spots for $5 a piece. And said the ad spots, and I raised enough money that they let me broadcast the State baseball games. And our closer was my color commentator. So he and I did the broadcast, and some games he didn't finish with me because he had to go into pitch. So he would be called into pitch to close out the game. So he would have to head out to the field. And that was Ray Tanner with NC State that gave me that opportunity. And I've always liked that. But the following year, I think they got some by people that were a little more in the radio space to take over the games. But I was, like I said, I started filming all the sports with NC State. And so I remember, and one day I went up to Coach Avent and assistant coach Billy Best, and I said, hey, I do camera work. If there's anything you ever need, let me know. And he's like, can you come out tomorrow? And I said, sure can. So I went out to practice and started filming batting practice sessions, pitching sessions, the games. I filmed every single game, and the coaches would look at it and analyze it, for mechanics. And like I said, back then cameras weren't everywhere. So it was still it was very rare to have, video cameras do that work at baseball. And so then I just spent time just around the team and around the players. And they're the ones that made me fall in love with baseball. That means especially baseball. They made me fall in love with it. Just the camaraderie with each other, they included me, right away. And it was such a good environment. And they all talked about the big leagues and filming games. I was always behind home plate, and I met a bunch of scouts, and there was no tie at that point. I just knew they were the scouts that came to the game, and I would talk to them and, hear about their travels a little bit. And they would maybe ask me, how's this guy been pitching lately and things like that. And I never knew that was the early stages. That was the early, start. And so I would, film every game for State, and I did that, for a couple of years. And but just being around the team, and also like my early years, that year in the ACC was one of the best years in the ACC there was. Like there was such good talent at every team, and like Virginia had Seth Greisinger, and Duke had the kid named Sean Weiss, and JD Drew was at Florida State. Randy Choate was at Florida State. Clemson had, Chris Benson and Koch and Vining and all them. So every week was just, amazing talent. And that kicked off my love for baseball because I would watch, State, and fortunately we had the talent to beat them sometimes. So it was just, that's where I kind of saw that, hey, we got to beat this guy that's going to be a future big leaguer, or it should be a future big leaguer. So that kind of started the ties of seeing that, we got to up our game to beat this guy tonight or beat that team tonight. And so with that much talent in ACC, that also made me fall in love with it and also showed me that connection between college ball and getting to the next level, with pro ball. And then after with being in the athletic world at State, there was a few internship opportunities that we had. And one was with a broadcast station called Sunshine Network in Orlando. I think it's now changed to Fox Sports South, but Sunshine Network picked me to do a paid internship, with them. And that was another avenue with broadcasting. And so, I went there, and the summer before that, though, all the players with State talked about going to Cape Cod to play summer ball. And I'll be honest with you, I had no clue where that was. I had no clue, but it sounded like a magical place, to be honest with you. I mean, it just sounded glorious. It was summer baseball all day, and it just sounded glorious. And I was like, I want to go. So I was like, I asked the coaches at State if they could help me get an internship up there. And they did. Sue Horton with the Orleans Cardinals, then Cardinals, now Firebirds. She picked me to be an intern for the summer. And, and my mom drove up with me and helped me because it was one of my first summers away from home, and got settled in, had me a part-time job and worked with the team at night. And one night I saw a man doing camera work. And so I went up, started talking to him because I was like, who's this guy with a camera? And he told me what he did for Major League Baseball and the Major League Scouting Bureau. And I said, that just sounds right up my alley. And so I called and introduced myself to Frank Marcos, who was the head then of the Scouting Bureau, and told him my experience and where I was and what I planned on doing coming up. And about a year and a half later, my position come open because the guy I talked to, he wanted an area job and to stay put. So he that opened up the camera spot for me. And Frank remembered me, and he interviewed me and some others, and fortunately gave me the shot. And I've been grateful ever since.
So that was your first job out of college, working for the Scouting Bureau.
Pretty much. I mean, permanent, like I said, Sunshine Network was a paid internship. So, I mean, that would be, but I knew that wasn't necessarily permanent. So that was like the first paid internship, but first formal full-time job, yes, was with Major League Scouting Bureau. So I was fortunate. I went from college straight to the big leagues, just like the players I was hoping to help get there.
Now, Christie, for those who might not be aware, what exactly was the Scouting Bureau? Describe what its purpose was.
What I think and what I've always learned, I think the Scouting Bureau was started to help have a competitive balance with all the clubs, with MLB and the players and the drafts. And I know at one point I think there was like 100 rounds in our draft. And so I think the Scouting Bureau was started in the 1970s, if I believe. And MLB had the Scouting Bureau, which has area scouts all over the country. And just like individual clubs have as well, they have their own scouts, and they would turn in reports on the players, and it would go to every team in baseball. And so it gave exposure to that player, to every team. And it gave here's another player recommendation for all the teams. So it kind of just gave exposure to the players and of another talent, out there. And I think, like I said, it just helped have a competitive balance and exposure to help with all those rounds of the draft. And then I think in the 90s, they started filming some players, and the camera technology was very, at this point, ancient, with a big shoulder camera and a side box they had to carry. And then that film started seeing the higher interest players a camera person started seeing the higher interest players. And so then in 2000, that was the job, that I was hired for. So I would see the higher interest players, get them on film, and it went to every team in baseball. And but even with doing that, with seeing the higher interest players, you also always had to keep your eyes open for who else you found. And there was quite a few players that I would find, as well as time of seeing the superstar, seeing some other players that I thought had a chance to get, to pro ball, and get them on film as well, and get that to all the clubs. So I've always said my reports were done with a camera. If I filmed them, I was recommending them as a possible to identify someone with pro tools.
So if I'm getting this right, the Scouting Bureau basically serviced all the teams, could provide a second opinion to what their own scouts would say,
Correct.
but also maybe they could cover some of the areas that major league teams didn't have scouts in. Is that correct?
Possibly, yes, very
Yeah.
possibly. Or it's just, I mean, it's hard to know, every college and what they have as well. So it was also another avenue where it maybe our scout saved a club scout time where he could go this way while our scout went that way. So maybe it also gave some crossover coverage to help fully cover the country.
Yeah.
And things like that. So it was just, like I said, it was another set of eyes, another set of tools to be at a game. Or maybe it was a second opinion on a player that clubs already know. Like, here's another opinion, of a talented scout that can, give his educated opinion. And so I think that is also just helped, like I said, also fill in gaps and, give some more coverage to maybe also some teams or schools that maybe wouldn't have gotten that exposure. I think it's just helped do a full coverage.
Do you remember your first day on the job with the Bureau?
I do. I do very much. And it was a kid in Orlando, and I can't think of the name of the high school, but I'm pretty sure the kid's last name was Torres. I think Torres. And I remember just going and saying, I just go, and I go film this guy and I turn it in. Okay. And I remember that, and and got him on film, and walked in and saw the other scouts. And I mean, as you can tell, I'm a very silent, shy person. So fortunately, I went up, and was talking to everybody, and I had been around ball players at that point about 3 or 4 years. So I wasn't probably as nervous as I should have been, but I just, went up and introduced myself to everybody, and hello. And, unfortunately, pretty much from the jump, everybody welcomed me in with open arms. And so just introduced myself to the scouts and acted like I'd known them for 30 years. So, but yeah, I remember that day very well. But the most impactful day was the first time I had to schedule a flight for a game. I was in Florida, and I heard of a matchup at Auburn with a kid from UNC Charlotte and a kid at Auburn matching up. And I'm like, I need to see both those guys. And they're playing each other. And I'm like, I just book a flight. I mean, I could just buy a flight and send it in, and MLB gives me that back, and I could just go fly and see them. And I just remember that first flight was actually more impactful than, sometimes than the others. I just remember that so vividly. Yeah. And MLB, they did reimburse me for the flight. So we were all good.
Who was your first boss?
Frank Marcos. And then, he would be Frank. And then I think I'm pretty positive Bud Selig was commissioner. So Bud Selig was commissioner. And then Sandy Alderson was another that was very influential with the Bureau. He had, we dealt with Sandy Alderson quite a bit. But yeah, Frank Marcos, first boss. And for the first, 15 years of my career, it was him.
When you joined the Bureau, did you realize that there had never been a woman doing this job before?
No, I didn't even, it actually wasn't even a thought in my head. Like, I heard about this great job. It sounded, perfect. It sounded right up my alley. It sounded like what I'd been working towards, for so long. And I just applied because I was like, I think that job sounds right for me. And it honestly, I didn't even think about my gender, to be honest with you. I mean, it just wasn't, I was just, I had been accepted by, so many college, teams and players and coaches and the scouts that came to our games. It wasn't even a thought in my head. And I remember about 6 months in, Frank come to me and said, hey, MLB.com wants to do a story about you. And I was like, about what? And he says, well, first female thing, or I don't know if he said thing, but first female, scout. And I was like, I am, I honestly, just young and you don't think of everything, but I truly just didn't even think of the fact that, I was a female, to be honest with you. And things like that. So, yeah.
Were there any veteran scouts who were particularly helpful to you those early years?
There were. I mean, especially, all the area guys especially were. And I do remember one time Frank Maddox, he was scouting director for Seattle Mariners at the time. And it was one of my early years. And we had an event and there was a rope up and it said scouts only, like, only scouts. So I didn't need to be in that section at the time, but I knew I would be in the future. And I saw a guard or usher, keep looking at me anytime I walked near that section. And I was just like, I think he wants to say something to me, but he's not yet. And so I kept, toying with the idea of needing to be in that section. And so I finally had to go in that section to work because it was behind home plate. And the usher came over to tell me to leave, that this was scouts only. And Frank Maddox, actually, before I even said anything, he stood up and he says, this is Christie Stansel, maiden name. She's an MLB scout. She deserves to be in here. And the guard just kind of sheepishly walked away. And that was like my at first, like, just like, yeah, he had my back. And, and before I even had to say anything, he was like, no, she's with us. She belongs with us. So that was always impactful to me. And so, yeah, and of course, the other scouts with the Bureau were always helping me lead the way. I mean, Willie Romay in South Florida, I would see him first every year. And I mean, the poor guy, I had been home a lot with family and then I was out on my own. And, that's a big jump. That's a big change from, being home and kind of around family to now being, by yourself all the time. Because as scouts, we're by ourselves, 95% of the time. And and he helped, especially in those early years, guide me and just help me of, ways of with ball and maneuvering. And like I said, Miami was one of the first to start playing ball every year because of the weather. So I would always start out in Miami and kind of work my way up the East Coast. And then there was other scouts, with the Bureau, Tim Osborne and Kevin Sochet and Gary Randall and on up the coast that were always, helping me in those early years and guiding me and, giving me insight. And then I would also watch the other scouts at the game. I mean, how they conducted themselves, how they carried themselves. And just, I learned a lot from them and just the way, like I said, they always included me in everything. It just felt like I had been doing it, for 20 years and stuff. So, yeah, I had, and I'm sure there's some other names that I'm not remembering right now to think of, but yeah, there were a lot of scouts that always, just, really helped me along and made me feel included.
I'm not asking you to name names, but was there anybody who discouraged you within baseball, said, yeah, this isn't right for you. This is not the right field. Anybody give you that kind of an attitude?
Not that I can, no, honestly, not that I can truly recall. I mean, and if they did, it wasn't, shown to me to where, it made an impact. I mean, I can, honestly say that it was just, I was included, from the jump. And and then maybe part of it is my personality because I just said, y'all are going to like me no matter what. So, and, just friendly and talkative. And I felt we had similar personalities. So I always, just I felt like I was among people like me, and just just always, had that good rapport and stuff. So not I can't, I mean, like I said, was I felt and I did after a while with learning that was the first email, like I knew I was being under the microscope a little bit. I mean, and under the microscope, and I know Frank Marcos was probably under the microscope because, he hired me and stuff. So I've felt, from the beginning a little bit that, I had some big shoes to fill and I had to carry myself in a way that represented MLB, Frank Marcos, the scouts, myself, players. I've always felt that I had to carry myself in a professional manner, that no one had a chance to say anything um, disparaging, or to
Yeah.
have a different opinion. So I've known from the get go that I had that on me, and I was going to fulfill it, and I was going to represent like I should.
Let's talk about your interactions with fans over the years. How have the fans treated you?
They're pretty good. I mean, they're fun. I mean, most everybody they know you're there to help their players. They know you're there to help their team and I always I try not to be noticed, to be honest with you, when I go to places, but I can't help but be noticed because
Yeah.
especially like I said, being a female, having camera equipment, I have to be in the best angles to get the work done. I'm going to be seen. So, treated, I would say, very well, of course. I mean, there's been, some, that maybe a little snarly or things like that. But for the most part, it's been a real fascination. Fans have, they always want to know, what am I doing this for? Who am I working for? And the next question, 99% of the time, is how'd you get into that?
Mhm.
So I've kind of been I've been like a beacon, of like light on me at games. So I stand out as much as I try to blend in sometimes. But I would say, 95% of the encounters with fans have always been pretty positive. They're pretty, like I said, they know you're there to help their guys. They know you're there to try to give their guys a job and to showcase what they can do, and they want their player to get to the big leagues, and
Yeah.
things like that. So nothing like glaring, stands out in a memory. But yeah, the fans I think have always been, pretty great. I mean, there's been some administrators with teams that, sometimes aren't as happy about us, but for the most part, the fans and scouts are always great.
Do you have young girls come up to you say, "Hey, I want to get into baseball. Give me some advice." Does that happen?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It happens with all sorts of young people, and it's especially girls and and things like that. So yeah, for sure. And I've had parents come up and ask me, you know, um, gosh, you're representing. I want to tell my daughter about you. I want to tell my son about you, and that's just a huge honor. I mean, I'm very honored whenever that happens. And so, yeah, and I get, young people and college age and sign a few autographs that, aren't worth much, but that's kids ask for autographs and, things like that and things. But yeah, definitely. I mean, people have all, and I've had older people, like people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, ask me how do I get started, doing this? And you had the best job ever. And I'm like, I know. And so yeah, it's quite attention from all ages. And one
Yeah.
thing that was really neat is women's pro baseball, like from a league of their own. They had an event last year that they asked me to speak at, and
Nice.
that was really inspirational to me. I mean, it was so many women and so many younger females, in high school age, college age, that kind of want to know the path to how to get to pro ball and things like that. And so yeah, I I love that when a young person asks me how to get somewhere or how to do this.
Did you meet anyone famous at that?
Yes, I mean there were some former players. There was probably like 5 to 6, 7 living players still from the days of back in the 50s.
The
That was
All-American League, yeah.
yeah, the American League playing and yeah, and they were still living and and came to see that and Gina Davis wasn't there, but she spoke to the group through video,
Oh,
and
nice.
so that was pretty neat. But yeah, definitely and former players like that.
Now, the Major League Baseball Scouting Bureau eventually was disbanded. This happened a number of years ago. Why did the Bureau go under? What was the cause?
I, I don't actually know an exact, reason. I think, it could be, just a change in philosophies, a change in ideals, a change in game plans, so to speak. I think it was, probably, just a multitude of reasons, and maybe just a changing of the kind of changing of the times. And I don't have a clear cut answer, to be honest with you. It was a great moment in time in baseball, and I think it's been a change with the times that's also worked out and been good since with MLB. So
Yeah.
I think it was just maybe a change in philosophies or just a change in ideals or a different way to do this work, and just a different thought pattern, I think.
Perhaps teams didn't want to collaborate with each other, wanted to be more independent. When you heard that the Bureau was coming to an end, did you have any concerns at all that you might be out of a job?
Of course. Yeah, definitely. Of course. Because it seemed it was mostly impactful to scouts and I knew that's what I was, but I also had the camera and I knew how much clubs loved our work and loved the camera work
Hmm.
and needed it. They relied on it and needed it and watched it, and it was a really valuable tool for them. And so I was always hopeful that as much as I didn't want anything bad to happen to anybody I worked with and cared about deeply. I didn't want anything to happen to any of us. I was still hopeful that my work was a different avenue that was still very important to the clubs and the scouts and fortunately it was, but it was some nervous times for a while, and just there was changes in, how we worked here, things like that. But I was willing to do whatever, needed, to be done or what MLB wanted me to do. And
Was there a gap at all? Was there a period of time you weren't working, or did you keep working all along?
I kept working all along, the same path, the same trajectory, pretty much the same role. And, and MLB gave time for the ones that weren't continuing on to find other avenues and other opportunities, which I thought was good. I mean, they gave people time, which was I thought that was a very nice move on their part, and they gave people time to get other opportunities, and everybody did. And but yeah, I continued on. Pretty much in the same path. There was, some, pushes to start seeing also some players younger go ahead and, get some things out on them, like players that were not their draft year, but maybe the year under, but you knew they were made possible, had some pro tools. And so, starting to look at some of them as well. So that was one of the changes that started being implemented, is start looking at some future players before draft year and things like that. But fortunately, continued on in the same trajectory, and the clubs definitely, I think, let it known that they still wanted my work and the other video scouts work.
Yeah. Chrissy, let's talk about video scouting. When you videotape a game, are you focused on one or two specific players, or do you take a broader approach?
It's a combination. It is a combination. I know that sounds like a broad answer, but I mean, you go in. I go in knowing, like I said, I say the superstars, and it's just kind of my way of categorizing it. But I go in knowing the players of interest starting out, and but as we say, you scout off the bus. You're going to notice players. You scan the field and you start to notice, guys that pique your interest just because of maybe their sheer size or things like that. So you start out, you scout off the bus. And is this an expression that we say in ball? But you always keep your eyes open for other players. I mean, you work, those players you get, but you also know this kid, has a very strong running speed. But maybe his bat needs a little bit, but he still has a pro tool over here with this run, and he's hitting, if his hitting maybe improves, he'll get there. So you flag that player as well because he has identified pro tools. So you keep your eyes open on everybody, and pitching I always feel is maybe a little quicker because if a guy comes out and he's throwing 80, probably not necessarily, pro player, but pitching, you can kind of size up, in my mind, a little quicker. I think you can size them up, but a little bit better. You know everything? Of course not. But you start to have a decent idea. And then hitters, they're graded out on more tools. So, hitters, sometimes you do have to take a second game because the first game, you weren't quite ready for that kid. Like you noticed him, but you don't know, so you come back for further information like the next day or the next game. So I do feel with pitchers it's maybe a little quicker to spot somebody with pro tools, and hitters I mean, sometimes of course you notice power out the gate. They hit 550 feet, so that's hard to deny. But with a hitter, I feel sometimes you need a little more time with a hitter. But if a kid runs four flat to first base, on a hit, then hey, he's got some speed. So there's some things that are really quickly noticeable, and that makes you start focusing on that kid more and things and help identify. But yes, I watch everybody in the game. There's nobody I say I can't see what he does. And sometimes with a superstar, you come in knowing them a little more. Like I maybe saw them the summer before, so I come in with a little bit of general knowledge about them. And so then I can start out, on a quicker first step. But you always, in fact, there was one of my famous stories is there was a player I went to see in Miami, and highly touted player. And I'm not gonna give names because y'all figure out who everybody is on this one. But he was a great player. Everybody had to see him, projected first rounder. Every time we went to see him, he either struck out or struck out swinging. And so I was like, man. But there was another player on his team that every single time I saw him hit double, ding, 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 and I'm like, who's this kid over here? So still kept eyes on a superstar, but also got the other kid. And then I gave the superstar 2 more games I come back to see if what he could do and give him more chances. Similar result. So, but the other kid, again, was still hitting. And I will say that in that year, the other kid also got drafted very well. They both got drafted very well. Both kids made the big leagues, but the kid that hit every time, I think, played a little longer in the big leagues. But
Who was that other kid? Can you say?
Huh?
Who was the other kid?
If I tell you that kid, then you know the first kid, so I can't do that. But
all right.
Just text me privately and I'll tell you.
Okay. Now, in this photograph we have of you here, you have 2 cameras.
Yeah.
Why 2?
One is attached to the radar gun. So we've always had that technology with what I do. There's always been a camera attached to the radar gun, and so on the tape, it'll put the speed of the tape. So every pitch, what that kid threw, which is very valuable tool. So you're watching the film and it'll pop up 95, 94, 80, 84, and things like that. So it is tied to the radar gun and it's filmed at regular speed. The other camera is a slow motion camera. I mean, it's a regular camera as well, but we do slow motion so you can analyze the mechanics better, and you can see the ball out the hand, how the arm works, how the body works. So the slow motion go in tandem, with the pitching. So get the pictures, you get a few very close up, and then you get full body. And hitters the same. I mean, hitters, I use one camera to get them at regular speed, and then the slow motion for as many slow motion swings as I can get. And there's not too much prettier than a slow motion home run. There's really not much prettier in what I do than when I capture a kid hit. And I say kid, but I know they're players, young men. But there's not much prettier than seeing a home run swing on slow motion.
Christie, are there times when the video doesn't fully capture how great a player is? Does that occur?
It can. I mean, it can. It'd be kind of a performance wise, like where a player is very talented, and maybe that night he got mostly walked, or they didn't give him anything really good to hit, so he would take the walk, or maybe he popped out because, like I said, they weren't giving him really something great to hit. So I think the camera will always show the tools, at best. It can capture how the body works, how the arm works, how the legs work, things like that. So I think the camera tells that story pretty accurately every time. And then I think when they get the hits or the pitching, it shows who they are. The only thing I would say is, like, this maybe for a performance night, it might not get to capture what that kid can do, just because of, like I said, either he didn't get something good to hit. And I mean, mostly for hitters, because I think with pitching, it shows pretty well what that kid did that night. Now, have I ever filmed a kid or player that I thought he was better than what he showed that night? Yes. And so the camera showed what he was that night, but I'll go back. So Justin Verlander is a great example of that. The first time I went to see Justin Verlander, he was at Old Dominion. I got film on him, and he was good. I mean, he looked okay that night, and for all other standards, he was great. But I knew that Verlander was a little better than the way he pitched that night. And so I went back a second time, and he was pitching more like himself. His velocity was higher. His, everything else was a little better. And with that, his draft status actually went higher because the film was better. And so it showed, him on a better night. So I think sometimes you can catch a player maybe not on their best night, and that camera shows that, but to come back to try to see him at a better game or a better light. And then I've had some players that the whole game I'm getting walk or strikeout, and sure enough, you hope for something finally that last at bat, grand slam or a triple or a double. So I think it shows what they are from a mechanical standpoint, or how they move, how they play. I just think the performance aspect can be different on any given day.
Sure. Let's talk about some of the great players you've had a chance to scout. Here we have Bryce Harper. Now, he played at Las Vegas High School, then went to the College of Southern Nevada. But I guess you saw him in a tournament, right?
Yes, I saw him in a few nationwide tournaments we have in the summer before, and you could see the obvious power. I mean, that was the first thing you noticed about Harper, was his power, and how he carried himself on the ballpark, how he he moved, how he walked around. He just carried himself, in a different light. And that power was, just very noticeable. And he seemed to be able to handle the attention and the limelight. You notice that level of maturity at an early age, where he was up for it. I mean, he was up for the challenge of that much attention and that much spotlight on him.
Yeah. You saw him when he was a catcher.
Yes, he was still a catcher, and still a catcher. And of course, I mean, catchers are one of the most sought after positions, in baseball, is finding, catchers. So that of course added to the draw for him, of course.
Yeah. Was it apparent to you that he would probably have to go to another position, which is what ended up happening?
Yeah, I mean, not at the time, because like I said, he was so young, and with high schoolers, they're young, and their path can go in many different ways. That's an option. A person might have to be moved to first base or the outfield or something like that instead of what they are at. But at that moment, you're still given time that he'll be a catcher, stay a catcher. And
Yeah.
with a college guy, you have a little more insight because they're older, they've been playing a while longer, and maybe they're playing this in college, more slated for that. But in high school, I think you give a lot more. There's a lot more latitude in your thinking because there's umpteen ways they can change. From high school, you
Yeah.
see the tools, you see how they're handle themselves, you see their ease at a position. But just sometimes, maybe just kind of the grind of baseball, they need to play first some instead of catch every game, things like that. But I think with high school players, you give a little more latitude because they are so young.
Christie, when you go see a star player, a great prospect like a Bryce Harper, do you also meet with the player? Do you talk to the player?
I don't, and I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't like to, but I don't want to, in essence, get in their head, as we
Yeah.
say, because here I am coming with that camera. I'm coming with something that's going to all 30 clubs automatically. So, like, if let's say a player is at a game and maybe only a couple of clubs are there, only those couple of clubs know if he has a bad night. When I come, everybody's going to know. Everybody's going to get the film. So you always hope someone's as great as they're going to be. And I don't want to. I mean, baseball players, they do get in their heads. They can get in their heads, just like pretty much any sports. But I don't want to try not to be known quite as much that I'm here to film you. It's going to every club in baseball. It's very important, and so I try not to let it know. They're going to notice eventually because, right behind home plate, and the cameras used to be bigger than they are. And now they were very noticeable early in my career and all that. And I'm usually wearing, MLB logo. So they're going to know eventually. But I try, especially with pitchers, I try my best to not ever talk to a pitcher before a game because, like I said, it is, that's why in the dugouts, you see them by themselves. They
Right.
stay by themselves, during a game kind of. So I love to speak. And sometimes, during batting practice, for batting practices, I am on the field and I am beside the cages because that's the only way to get the best look of their swing and BP.
Right.
So the hitters a lot of times will know I'm here to see them that day. And they may or may not know who I am or what I'm doing, but most of the time they do, or they recognize me for the summer. And some players, they'll come up right away. Hey, good to see you again. And
Yeah.
won't make eye contact, for anything in the world. So I kind of let them, if they want to speak to me, and maybe if it's like a college guy I've seen 10 times, I might be like, I'm like, good to see you again, or something like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I let them, approach me, and I would love to talk to them. I just don't want to. I don't want to in any way interfere, what they're doing or what they got to do. And so
Sure.
I love to talk to players. I mean, it's like one of my favorite things. But I definitely I don't want to get in their head about how important what that work is because
Here's another great player you scouted, and you did have a chance to see him in high school, Mike Trout.
Yes, one of my favorites. I mean, just found out about, of course, because of it was in New Jersey. Couldn't really see him till a little later in the year because it's cold. Till about mid-April up there, and stuff. But went to see Trout, and I didn't have much of a history on him. But the first thing I noticed is he carried the balls to the field. The giant toe balls for BP, he carried them to the field. And that shows a lot to me of makeup, character. That shows right off the bat, that shows quite a bit to me. And then of course I also noticed the 40 other scouts there. So I knew this kid had something going on for himself. And so so got him on film. And then after the game, he also carried the balls back in. And like I said, that showed me makeup off the jump, about, just upstanding person. Not saying if someone else didn't carry the ball, say the same thing. I'm not saying that, but
Yeah.
just showed me that he didn't say, I'm the best player out here. Someone else do that. He did it. he carried the balls to and from the field. And he was one with his teammates. And he played very well that day. And so you knew this kid is on his way.
Yeah, great combination of power and speed.
Right.
Just a phenomenal player. He's had some injury problems in recent years, but a terrific career without question. Here's David Wright. You saw him play at Hickory High School in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Yes, I did. And David Wright is a very, very special story to me because he was one of my first years working. His draft, I'm pretty sure was '01, I think, right? '01. And so and I started in 2000. So that summer I saw him and he hit. Every event we had, he hit. I was like, this kid, like I said, he's a hitter. And it's for being, a high school kid to notice him with that much hitting ability is rare and it stands out. But I saw he hit. And so that spring, the report on him wasn't quite as high as I would go after. So back then we used to have a thing called an OFP number, which overall future potential. And when a kid was a certain number or higher, that's when I went to see him. And so his number wasn't quite at a filmable number. But I was like, I know this player is a guy. I know he can hit. I saw him. But I was also very young. It was in one of my first years, and it was a seasoned scout that was his recommendation of this is the level he's at and future potential. And so I was in a rock and a hard place where I don't really want to, maybe say, I think this player is better than you think, especially being first year on the job. But I trusted my instincts and I trusted my gut that this kid can really hit and he needs to be on film. I need to get him to the clubs. And so I had to find a day when there wasn't any other game going on. Like in my area, there was no other game. I called the coach and I said, hey, I really need to come, get some film on David Wright. So he said, well, we're practicing. And I said, well, I'll get whatever I can. So went up there and I'm in Raleigh. So went up to Chesapeake, Virginia. And I got batting practice on him. And they did a mock game for me. They did a on the spot, a mock game. So David could have some at bats. So I was just like, we made up a game. And so I got, BP and infield on him, infield drills, where they take IO. And they made up a game. And he was the only hitter. But they made up a game and got some great at bats on him. And then of course he was a sandwich pick, in the first round. And if I'm not mistaken, sandwich pick or second round, but he was drafted as high as I thought he should be. And of course, went on to have the illustrious career he did, and also a wonderful human. But I was proud of myself because that was one of the first major crossroads I remember being at where I've got to make the call for myself. And I've got to be able to stand up and say, I have my own opinion about how good I think he is. And that's why I need to go. Because it was different than what we were traditionally, I would say, allowed, maybe to go do. So I had to take that responsibility that I'm going to take a day and go see him.
One other player you wanted to mention that you had a good story about, Jacob deGrom.
Great story about Jacob deGrom. I didn't know anything about him coming in, but opening weekend, one of the seasons, his draft year, he was at Stetson University and they played at University of Georgia, and both teams at the time were mine. They were in my area. So it was a good matchup to start out with. But so deGrom played shortstop all weekend, all weekend, all the games. It was the last two innings on the last day on Sunday where I thought I had seen just about everybody play that was, going to play. And had my stuff, there kind of packed up, ready to go. But you always stay to the end because you never know what you're going to see. So sure enough, I see this player come out from the bullpen, for the 8th and 9th inning. And I was like, that's that shortstop, bringing him into pitch. And I don't think he was quite a prospect as a shortstop. So, but I watched him, coming in. I'm like, I got to see what he can do. There's only 2 other scouts there. That was it. And this was opening weekend for college baseball, so there wasn't any history. And so I watched him, and some of the scouts kind of jokingly like, "What you doing? What you doing, Christie?" And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna watch this kid, see what he can do." They're like, "You sure? You sure you're gonna stay and watch him?" Kind of messing with me. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna see what this kid can do." So he got out there pitching, and I saw how like just loose and easy he threw it. And he only threw it like 91, 92, which, for a lever, you kind of maybe see a little more velocity. But that time he threw like 91, 92, but he threw it easy, and his body worked like it's supposed to work. So I pulled everything out, and I got some film on him, and it went to everybody, in baseball, and the attention, grew and grew and grew, and kind of, got out on him, and he ended up being, I think, like an 8th round pick. Because like I said, at that time, the velocity wasn't quite there, but the tools were, and the body and how he threw it, you knew he could possibly get there. Now, did I know he was going to throw 98 one day and probably be a Hall of Famer? No, I didn't. And anybody that says that, they didn't know either. So, I'll jokingly say, of course I knew he was destined for greatness, but I didn't. I knew he had something, and I knew he had the tools to possibly be his outcome and possibly be his path. And so fortunately, it was.
Great stories. Our guest has been pioneering Major League scout Christie Wood. We should also mention Christie is featured in the new documentary Fielding Dreams, which we actually debuted at the Hall of Fame back in January. And it's going to be shown again this spring down in Sarasota, Florida. Eventually, I think it'll probably be on some network, some television outlet or streaming service. And Christie is one of the featured guests, very prominent in that documentary about scouts called Fielding Dreams. Christie, really appreciate your time. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Well, thank you. Oh, it's been an honor. It's been an honor to talk to you as well. And I, just about told everybody I could. And my dad's no longer with me, but I feel he knows. And then, made sure, my mom, knows as well. Her health, she's still with me, but I made sure to tell her too about this. And this is honestly a dream come true. I mean, it's Cooperstown. So I'm very honored that y'all wanted to speak to me.
Well, we're honored to have you. This will be in our archive, so your friends and family will have plenty of opportunities to see it. Again, our guest, Christie Wood, has been working in Major League Baseball for about 25 years as a scout, has been our guest this past hour on Virtual Voices of the Game. We appreciate Christie joining us. We appreciate all of our viewers as well. Take care, everybody.